The story begins with the narration of a somber voice that tells us about the Dark Lord, the Cursed One. It is then revealed that the Lord is the king of all evil, as there is none who can oppose him. Just then, a knight kicks through the walls, causing the wall to crumble to pieces, and the man breaks in. The man yells out to summon the Dark Lord as he sits patiently on his throne. The Dark Lord responds to the man, expressing that he is indeed there. Following the dramatic entrance, the knight takes off his helmet to reveal his shiny blonde hair, and he greets the king of evil before stating that he will kill him. The blonde man has blue eyes and shiny hair. He glares at the Dark Lord and introduces himself as the strong warrior, Firkin. The evil king leans forward as his eerie voice echoes through the room, and he remarks on how arrogant Firkin is. Pointing at the Dark Lord, Firkin glares with the intent to defeat and kill, asking him to be quiet. However, in an instant, he feels a whiff of dark energy flow past him. Standing where he is, Firkin is dazed as a loud blast follows right behind him, his finger still pointing forward at the evil king. The pressuring aura of the Dark Lord is felt by our hero as the evil king confronts the warrior. He asks if there's a need for small talk. He wants to end the battle here and now, as a purple ball of dark energy spirals and collects before him. Firkin boldly still stands in front of the evil king to confront him. He mentions and asks why the Dark Lord talks with frequent stops mid-sentence, pointing out that it's distracting. Our hero suggests that the Dark Lord talk normally. However, stuttering and stopping mid-sentence, the evil king points his sword at our hero as he warns him to be silent. The sword faces Firkin as he glares menacingly at the Dark Lord. The Dark Lord expresses that there are different kinds of people in the world, and so he asks if he is some kind of racist. Firkin's facial expressions harden. He glares viciously at his target, and he confronts the evil king, telling him not to dare mock the strong warrior, the chosen one who annihilates all evil. He unsheathes his weapon, and the weapon shines and glows as he yells at the Dark Lord, telling him that he has come here to cut down his head. Firkin remarks that such is the legacy of the Great One, and the sword of glory that eradicates all evil. He calls upon the glory of the holy sword, but is stunned to see the crude goblin axe in his hand. He tilts the weapon up to inspect, and questions what such a weapon is doing in his hand. Adding to the hero's query, the Dark Lord also questions if the weapon in his hand is the holy sword. Naturally, Firkin denies the weapon to be the holy sword. He immediately takes a step back, and nervously elaborates that the real holy sword is in the pocket dimension magic pouch. The Dark Lord is confused, but Firkin is persistent and proceeds to explain that the pouch can store anything without any space restrictions. He swings forth a weapon that glows and shines brightly, exclaiming that here is the secret divine sword. However, to his surprise, the weapon turns out to be the wooden staff of the ancient spirit. Our hero desperately reaches in to take out another weapon, glowing and shining, and yells out that it's something sharper than the staff. This time, a sword actually appears in his hands, but he is once again taken aback when he realizes that it's the legendary large and beautiful demon crusher. Sweat trickles down his face as he nervously ponders and reaches into the magic pouch to look for something smaller and more powerful. Taking out a handgun from the pouch, Firkin recognizes it as the sharp semi-automatic judge of the underworld. The Dark Lord is done with this nonsense, as he calls the human to question what kind of fictional character he's supposed to be. He asks him to come forward wielding whatever absurd weapon he wants to wield. Weapons clank on top of each other as a large number of them gather around on the ground, while our hero desperately reaches inside to find his desired holy sword. Disappointed, Firkin looks down at the ground as the realization dawns upon him that there is no holy sword. The Dark Lord's patience is being tested to its limit, and it seems like he's done waiting. He raises his sword and calls Firkin to come forward and fight, as dark energy bursts out and flares in the air. Our hero trembles, and his voice cracks in fear and nervousness. He's worried that he cannot find the holy sword. His eyes widen, and he profusely sweats at the shocking realization that he has lost his most prized possession. Firkin glares upon the anomaly that stands before him, ready to engage in battle and strike him with full might. He stands still, dazed and confused. He eventually lets out a sigh, accepting the untimely fate of his impending death, whispering that he is now fully doomed. 30 years have passed, and we are brought to the setting of the secluded dungeon, the Forgotten Citadel. A man wields a sword, poised to attack and strike the opponent standing before him. The man pants and catches his breath, groaning and remarking on the unfortunate situation he's been put in. The evil and heavy voice of the opponent calls at the adventurer. The skeletal being questions if this is all the man has got, remarking it to be boring, and introducing himself as the guardian of the Forgotten Citadel, Xylok. Xylok exclaims that the man cannot defeat him with such measly skill. However, he is immediately interrupted and struck down by the brave warrior, who lands a sword blow on his head, breaking the crown he held on his head into 2 pieces. Xylok falls to the ground as the man stands before the defeated demon. He glares at him with satisfaction, elaborating that Xylok was a strong enemy. Xylok's skeletal body lies on the floor, groaning and thanking the man for the compliment. The man sheathes his sword on his back, standing before the defeated demon as its body burns away with bright blue flames. Following the battle, the man narrates, introducing himself as Johnson, a normal adventurer. He tells us that the holy sword has been passed down through stories and is said to have disappeared alongside the warrior many years ago. He adds that him and his comrades have set out to find it. Narrating his journey, he tells us that they were looking for the holy sword and encountered many tough enemies along the way. They made their way to the citadel after hearing of a dungeon that possessed the magical sword. Wind blows as the dust scatters across the halls of the citadel, and Johnson makes his way out, contemplating that this place is much more dangerous than they expected. He wonders if his friends are all okay. His eyes widen and he stops in his tracks when a strange voice calls out to him, exclaiming that this is the end of the road for him. Nervous to encounter another anomaly, Johnson slowly turns his head around to see who is calling upon him. His eyes glare at two men, fully covered as dark purple energy flares around them, and they cackle at the sight of the man standing in front of them. He exclaims that the two men are alive and walks up to them, recognizing them as his comrades, the mage and the archer. Johnson asks them if something has happened to them, since he was just about to go looking for them. But strangely, the archer remarks that they are completely fine. Just then, the archer is interrupted by the mage, who adds that they actually did come across the true final boss, Herdmark, and the archer believes that they were completely off the mark in finding the holy sword. Johnson takes out a map to gaze upon the route, as he tells the mage that he was hoping it would be here, since he had paid a steep price for this information at the Thieves' Guild. The archer contradicts this claim as he questions that Johnson had told them he had to eat grass stew for quite some time because he did not have money. Johnson chuckles, remarking that sometimes this is what one has to do for an adventure. He elaborates and likens the journey to a small boat sailing across the vast ocean, moving forward even amidst adversities and hardships. He tries to explain to the two comrades that such is the pilgrim's path to find the holy sword, and they don't need to get sad over just a few coins. He tilts his head at the two comrades, emphasizing that this is for the legacy of the great warrior. But suddenly, the mage and the archer harden their facial expressions in shock as they yell at Johnson to shut up and open his pouch. The three of them stand patiently and prepared to see what emerges, while the mage points out the overwhelming energy that flows through the air. They suddenly feel the overwhelming weight of the energy as they all scatter around to find the source of this strange feeling. The mage's eyes widen, and he appears to be in fear as he points out his hand at the door in front of them, yelling that there is something beyond that door. Johnson, along with the archer, prepares their weapons and gets ready. The archer remarks that the overwhelming energy is giving them goosebumps, and Johnson warns them to get ready, because this is not going to be an easy fight. The door in front of the team slides open and creaks as a demon emerges from it, snarling and groaning. Getting ready to face the demon, the team prepares their weapons and calls for their lord to help, while Johnson alerts them to get ready for battle. The dark demon steps out the door, fully plated in armor, and with a heavy voice, calls at them to run away. Johnson flares up to engage in battle as he yells at the inhuman to be quiet. However, it is hit with a sword on its head as it calls at him, asking him to run away quickly. The sword that strikes the inhuman is wielded by a mysterious man with blonde hair and a long beard. The team stares at the odd sight of the man standing before them. Johnson and the archer take a step back in nervousness, questioning this sight. The blonde man looks down as he sighs in disappointment and whispers that it is not here. Pointing the sword at the man, Johnson questions him, asking if he is a human or a monster, and demanding that the man reveal his identity immediately. The blonde man, however, glares somberly at the group as he whispers that there is no holy sword here. His eyes glow viciously, and he demands of the group to bring him the holy sword. Taken aback, the group stands there in a daze as they once again feel the overwhelming weight of the energy that the man gives off. The archer questions if such a feeling could be the wrath of the holy sword, but Johnson does not seem to recognize this phenomenon as he looks at him in confusion. He explains and tells of a man who went crazy after receiving the curses of those who sought out the holy sword, and he says that the wrath, too, wanders for eternity, seeking the holy sword and killing everyone in its path. The blonde man slowly makes his way forward as he mutters about the holy sword and demands it, and the mage exclaims that he is the cursed evil spirit. Johnson turns his head at the two comrades as they take a step back in confusion and fear. They question the fact that the overwhelming energy was being given off by such an entity, and ask him to run away immediately. But Johnson grits his teeth in frustration and questions this statement. He is adamant as he asks why it matters if the anomaly they face is the wraith. Rushing forward without a second thought, Johnson swings his sword with full might at the blonde man, yelling out that wraiths also die when you hit them. In a show of the overwhelming power that the blonde man possesses, he immediately stops the sword with his bare hands and knocks Johnson away. Johnson falls back, spiraling down the floor as he groans in pain. The archer pulls back on his arrow, preparing to strike. He yells out in frustration as he calls the arrow the one that does not miss. But that doesn't stop the blonde man from charging forward. He slides and swiftly makes his way to the archer. Arrogance will only help you for so long, and this is a lesson that the archer learns when he calls upon the blonde man, asking if he forgot that it's an arrow that does not miss. However, the blonde man is unharmed and stands before him. He turns his head to find the 2 arrows fallen on the floor. The archer wails and cries in horror, calling out for the mage, and yelling at him to quickly use magic and kill the powerful adversary. Green energy crackles and sparks around the atmosphere as the mage reaches forward with his staff, telling the archer to stay back. He yells out the spell, Ash, and the energy flares and sparks up around him. He continues with another magic spell, Flash, but the archer is alerted at the sight of the powerful energy sparkling before his eyes. He yells at the mage, questioning if he plans to eradicate him along with the enemy. The energy continues to run rampant around the atmosphere as the mage yells out an answer to the archer's concern. He believes the situation to be unfortunate, but he is persistent that he should get rid of the stragglers according to the pirate rules. Just then, however, the mage is hit with a sword to the face. With his fall, the gathering energy is immediately dissipated. He falls to the ground and groans in pain, while the archer and the blonde man stand before him. The archer attempts to reason with the blonde man, suggesting that they should talk it out. However, the blonde man does not seem to be satisfied. He just wants his fucking holy sword. Dark energy once again overpowers the air, making it heavy as he asks if the archer has the holy sword. Refusing the claim, the archer is struck down by the blonde man, after which he claps his hands to wipe away the dust. In the next instance, Johnson musters the strength to hold himself up and calls at the blonde man. He remarks that the blonde man is nothing like the dead. He points out all the abilities of the blonde man, speculating that there should only be one other person in history who fits that description. Our hero turns his head to Johnson, who concludes that the strong warrior standing before him is Firkin, the legendary warrior. He yells at the living legend, exclaiming that he is a fan and asks him for his signature. But he is startled and confused when the legendary warrior walks up to him with his fingers about to flick his forehead. Johnson is taken aback and confused as our hero states that the warrior is dead. He adds that the strong warrior died 30 years ago after a fierce and bloody battle. He no longer walks the mortal plane. Johnson does not buy the explanation, and he yells out to narrate the stories that the people told. The warrior had disappeared with the holy sword long ago, and he persistently questions why our hero looks like this, when he, in fact, is the legendary warrior. Firkin glares calmly at the desperate voice of Johnson, who calls at him to come back to the world that has not yet forgotten him. He looks around for the holy sword to try and prove it to him. But his efforts are futile, and our hero flicks him with his finger, blasting him away with such a powerful blow that Johnson falls to the ground and goes unconscious. The legendary warrior is fed up with the constant yapping and ranting. He questions why people who know nothing are always so jumpy, exclaiming that it is a fact that the warrior died on that day. He adds that not only did the legendary warrior abandon his comrades, but he disgustingly and underhandedly survived, losing the holy sword along the way. He glares at the unconscious body of the kid lying before him, and addresses him to claim that such kind of a warrior who even loses the holy sword is nothing more than an embarrassment. The scene then switches to an army of skeletal beings, snarling with their swords raised against the human enemy they face. The great number of blue skeletal beings shows overpowering strength. A great battle ensues, humans fighting the skeletal beings in a war, with men shouting and yelling to never back down against the anomalies. Fire is set ablaze in the background, as the commanders yell at the soldiers to bring death upon the revenants. Knights swing their swords, and strike down the skulls of the revenants as they call the scumbags to die. The knight yells at his comrade, Vendal, alerting him of the opportunity, exclaiming that he is going to take them all down with wide-range magic. However, the mage named Vendal contradicts that he does not have any energy left to produce an attack, which makes the knight scoff at the unforeseen circumstance. The knight is once again alerted when Vendal addresses him as Errol, and calls at him to get ready, because another wave of revenants is coming. He falls back along with the mage, obeying his command, and in the spirit of the battle, he yells out to teach the revenants a lesson, all while the mage holds onto himself, grunting over back pain. Striking down the revenants with his sword, he manages to make his way through the swarm of skeletal beings as he yells at the scum to die. But his eyes widen, and he is taken aback. A wave of dark energy blasts at the knights, blowing them away as they groan in pain. He shoves his sword into the ground to provide some support to prevent himself from blowing away, and as the smoke clears, the mage calls at him to ask if everything will be okay. The knight glares at the man standing before them emerging from the swarm, and states that he is here. He elaborates and addresses the man as the King of the Dead, the first knight among the 4 commanders of the Dark Lord, the Wraith King. The Wraith King viciously glares at the knights standing before him, and proceeds to greet them with a strong grin, but he is interrupted by the knight, calling him the Nameless One. He questions this title and hardens his facial expressions to elaborate that there seems to be some sort of misunderstanding. But once again, he is interrupted by the knight who calls at him to shut up. A helmet clanks to the ground as the knight yells at the king, exclaiming that he will not listen to the likes of a monster like him. The knight reveals his face, as a burning sword blazes fiercely in his left hand, while another is wielded in his right. He introduces himself as Errol Orphan, and states that he is the one who will take the Wraith King down. However, the mage standing beside him contradicts this claim, saying that it might not be necessary. Errol has a look of confusion as he questions this statement by the mage. A blonde man makes his way through the knights as they step away to clear his path, and the mage introduces the blonde man as our beloved hero, Firkin. Errol calls upon Firkin the Strong and asks him to come forth quickly as they face yet another mighty opponent. Our hero hysterically apologizes for being late and cracks jokes, asking if the Wraith King had fun. Following the tone of the question, the king answers and tells that he was just starting to get bored. He acknowledges the king's concern and revises that they will be having some fun from now on, calling the king the Nameless One. This does not sit right with the king as he grunts and grits his teeth in frustration. He retorts that our hero, calling him the Nameless One, is a contradiction to the title itself. Following the hysterical tone of the conversation, the strong warrior agrees with the king and decides to now call him the Named One. Enough with the sarcasm and jokes, our hero now seems to be prepared for battle as he reaches into his magic pocket to slowly take out a glowing weapon. He calls it the Named One to brace himself, because this is not the gift he had planned for their first encounter. A sword emerges from the magic pouch as it glows, and the immense pressure of strong energy surges through the atmosphere, blowing away the dust off the ground. He calls at the king to be prepared, since he's sure that this will give him nightmares. The Named One doesn't seem to be pleased with the weapon, as he smiles and questions what kind of absurd weapon that is, asking if it is some kind of magic sword. But our hero denies, and explains it to be the Holy Sword. Bringing us back to the present, our hero travels through the plains on a horse-drawn carriage, muttering the words of the Holy Sword repeatedly. His eyes widen, and his voice grows darker as he continues to utter the words. The men traveling with him in the carriage look at him with confusion, startled by this sight and feeling scared. The carriage suddenly comes to a stop, and the man calls at the strong warrior to inform him that they have arrived. It has stopped before a dark somber valley, and the man explains it to be the horrifying cursed dreadful valley that they can step into, but cannot get out of. The warrior steps out of the carriage, holding onto his covered weapon as he comments that it's a long-ass name for one place. The men don't agree with the warrior and refute his claim. One of them elaborates that this place is the lair of the Wraiths, and he adds that countless adventurers have failed to get out of this place after entering it. He also mentions that rumors call this place the home of the Wraith King, which confuses the warrior. So the man explains to the warrior that the Wraith King is the king of the dead, and the first Wraith King among the 12 Lich, adding that he is a terrifying fellow who curses the living and leads an army of Wraiths. Meanwhile, the warrior strokes his beard, contemplating the fact that the king is still alive. The man calls at the warrior, asking what someone at his age is doing in a place like this. He questions if the warrior plans on entering the valley. And so, Firkin answers that he had heard of the legendary sword being in such a place, so he has come to look for it. The man finds this to be a strange explanation, but before he can follow up with more questions, Firkin tosses the covered weapon at him, asking him to take it. He opens up the knots of the cover to reveal a magic sword, and elaborates that the sword is the magic sword of the Citadel. The man is fazed and startled by the overwhelming power that surges from the sword. Firkin tells him that it's a compensation for what the man has done for him, but he warns him not to get power drunk from the magical sword's powers. In a show of arrogance, the man wields the sword, claiming that only a weak ass would say some shit like that. Our hero gazes upon the man leaving in the carriage, but immediately jumps off moments later, yelling out that he is going to engage in battle. He then glares at the valley in front of him and sighs at the words of the legendary sword, and he steps forward, believing that the sword should be here. Inside, he is greeted by a wraith that yells and snarls at him, telling him that it will kill him. But suddenly, it is hit with a bone to the skull as it groans in pain. Our hero raises the bone once again, scolding the wraith for being so noisy, and asks if it had swallowed a dildo. But the wraith apologizes and says that it has anger management issues. He questions that the living aren't allowed in the valley, and he states that the warrior is putting him in a difficult position. He claims that this place is their land, the land of the dead. Countless wraiths gather around at the commotion, witnessing a human beating up another wraith. The wraiths yell and call out to our hero to question who he is and what he is doing here. Shutting up the commotion, he raises the bone once again, indicating that he is going to hit him again, ordering them to shut their traps and just bring him the holy sword. But the poor creature does not seem to know about such a sword. Our hero punches and strikes through the wraiths, breaking their bone structures as they groan and yell out in pain, asking him to stop bullying the dead. He swings the bone once again, striking the wraiths fiercely, and states that he thought they could talk it out. But that does not seem to be the case. He calls at them to be free from the cycle of life and death as they groan and yell our Buddhist chants. Our hero makes his way through them, striking and breaking them left and right. Other bystander wraiths observe in confusion, contemplating that the wraiths are supposed to be immune to physical damage, but somehow, the warrior is making his way through all of them one by one. The strong warrior now comes across the group of bystanders, raises his arms to strike, and calls at them to be free and meet the Lord Buddha. But to his surprise, the wraiths have run away and made their escape as they scatter away in fear for their lives. He smacks the bone in his palm, satisfied with the saying that violence is a great tool for communication. Just then, a voice calls out to the warrior, telling him that it is him. He turns his head to attend to the situation, as a wraith guides the Wraith King towards him. The wraith bows before the king, and calls at him to bring justice upon his army, but the king simply chuckles and scoffs. He faces the human standing before him, complimenting the incredible show of power and strength, and asking him to reveal his identity. Our hero remarks that it seems like the king does not seem to recognize him, but he believes it to be understandable since quite some time has passed since their last meeting. He changes his stance to address the Wraith King, the named one, asking him to have fun like they did back then. The king sighs as the realization dawns upon him that they have met before. He recalls his memory and wonders if the blonde human standing before him is Firkin, the legendary warrior. Our hero confronts the Wraith King, asking if he still remembers him. The king affirms and asks how he can forget someone like him. The past events of the battle that took place play in his head as he mentions that the strong warrior, Firkin, humiliated him and stripped him of his dignity in the past. Changing the conversation's tone, the strong warrior questions this statement and justifies his actions by saying that the king had done something bad, so he got beaten up. However, now the warrior is an old man, so the king has nothing to worry about. He also mentions that he is no longer the same warrior, he has given up the title. But the king does not seem amused as he asks if the warrior has heard of an old man who swings a femur and beats up wraiths. Acknowledging the scene, the king signals the wraith beside him to leave. He addresses the strong warrior, asking why he is here and if he's here to take him down. Confused and taken aback by the heavy claim, he mentions the holy sword and explains that he had heard it could be found here. The king does not seem fond of such a weapon, but our hero won't buy this act. With a hardened expression, he knows such a weapon is here, capable of extraordinary feats and possessing incredible power. He raises the bone in his hand at the king, asking him to bring the sword while asking nicely. The king finally breaks his act and affirms that the holy sword is here. But he steps forward, smoke fills the atmosphere, and he asks why he should listen to the warrior. He exclaims that he is a lich who has transcended death. He gets up close to the warrior and states that an old warrior like him cannot kill him. Firkin acknowledges this threat and adds that in such a case, he's going to torture the king until he begs for death. The king is amused by this claim, but he is curious to know why the strong warrior is looking for the sword again when he possesses the holy sword. Firkin is speechless, but he somberly answers that he does not have it. The king questions what it is that he does not have, and the warrior tells of the holy sword. Another question follows. The king asks if he had it before. Strangely, the warrior tells that he simply just does not have it. Teasing the warrior, the king questions if the man known as the greatest warrior has lost the holy sword, and Firkin hardens his facial expressions and grits his teeth in frustration. Pointing at Firkin, the king asks if he's planning on tricking him by saying he has lost the sword, believing he has caught the warrior in the act. The strong warrior has had enough and immediately turns his head to viciously glare at the king. He says that the king is quite a mouthful. In the next instant, Firkin has appeared behind the king, his arms cocked back to strike the king's head with full force. He exclaims that he has changed his mind and is willing to communicate. The king dodges and steps away in confusion at what sort of communication this is. Explained by the strong warrior, it's a physical communication. He continues to dodge and step away as the warrior swings the femur, mentioning that he does not know what made him lose the sword. Just as our hero makes his way to strike and attack the king with his bone, the Wraith King disappears into thin air. Firkin is alerted to see that the king has vanished as dust scatters in the air. He firmly grips the femur in his hand. The Wraith King continues, exclaiming that if the warrior does not have the sword, he's no match for him in the land of the dead. A large avatar of a dark entity covered with a robe holds a scythe in its hand as the king continues to speak about the land of death, brimming with corpses, where no one can defeat him. He points forward and addresses Reaper, the Reaper, asking him to harvest it. Our hero bravely approaches the king, bonking the femur on his head. He asks what needs to be harvested. The king startles and yells for the Reaper to kill the warrior quickly. The large scythe swings with full force at our hero as the Reaper obeys and somberly fulfills the Wraith King's wish. The Reaper, too, is surprised when his scythe is caught by our hero, cracks appearing to signify his amazing strength. He asks if the Reaper wants to engage in communication with him too. Surprised and dazed by the amazing show of strength, the Reaper vanishes. The strong warrior breaks off a piece of the scythe, holding it firmly in his hands to threaten and warn the Wraith King, who crawls before him. The king slides away yet again, maintaining distance from the monstrous beast that stands before him. Firkin the Strong holds the scythe on his shoulders, fiercely calling out for the Wraith King. He tells him to count to 3 and asks the king to kindly bring the sword to him within that time. He begins the countdown, and the king, as confident as ever, musters sharp crystals through his fingers. He tells the warrior it won't be so easy this time around. He shoots the shards of crystals directly at the warrior, yelling out for him to die. But the king's eyes widen, and he's taken aback as the strong warrior Firkin emerges from the smoke, continuing the countdown. The king does not give up. He glares and groans as the warrior approaches him. He raises his hand, a weapon appearing slowly, stating that he will now show the warrior. Just as our hero finishes the countdown and is about to swing the scythe, the Wraith King bows and presents a sword, exclaiming it to be the rumored legendary sword. Our hero is satisfied with his efforts at what he believes is communication. Meanwhile, the king deepens into contemplation and despair, acknowledging the humiliation he must face in front of all who envied him and thought of him as the king. His speculation appears true as the bystanding wraiths whisper, questioning the standard of their king. He questions just what the warrior did for 30 years for him to come back in the form of a devil. But just then, Firkin the Strong asks him if the weapon really is the legendary sword. Nervously, the king presents the sword and explains it to be the rumored legendary longsword. Our hero gazes at the weapon for a while, contemplating. After contemplating, Firkin realizes the weapon is not the holy sword. He intimidates the Wraith King, forcing him to reveal the truth. The king admits they never had the legendary sword in the first place. It was a false rumor to attract adventurers. He adds that due to recent plagues and wars, adventurers have not been venturing out much. This was their only option to harvest fresh souls. The strong warrior questions the point of telling him now, and the king expresses disappointment. But to his surprise, the warrior adds that he's also questioning the point of killing him. The warrior believes the king is just doing his thing, surviving. Still not believing this outcome of the battle, the king asks if he's not going to harm him. Our hero is fed up with the questions. He explains once and for all that he didn't come here to kill him, though he could if he wanted to. Now that he's confirmed the holy sword isn't here, there's nothing left to do. He steps away, mentioning that even if he killed him, he would just come back. There's no point in doing something useless. He contemplates the idea of coming back for a moment. The king steps up and points at the exit for the strong warrior to leave, complimenting this gesture of a true hero. But as he adjusts his attire, the strong warrior asks him if he can bring someone back from the dead. He elaborates on real resurrection, not just a mindless wraith that roams unaware of its life. The king questions this, asking if the warrior takes him for a divine dragon. He tells that he cannot bring people back from the dead. However, he strokes his chin, explaining that it is possible to summon a dead soul and have it possess another body. He elaborates that's what's called a lich. Our hero chuckles softly, putting his hand on the king's shoulder. He whispers that he wonders why he didn't think of something like that. He glares viciously into the Wraith King's eyes, asking him to make a lich for him. The tree's leaves rustle and the metal pieces clank together as a knight walks through the forest alongside a cloaked man. But the knight is immediately confronted by a group of bandits rushing toward him with blades and swords in their hands. They block the knight's path, grabbing their weapons firmly and threatening the men. The knight addresses the bandits and warns them to get out of the way. But before he can finish, an arrow pierces through his helmet, and the knight falls back. The mercenary gazes upon the fallen body of the knight who was supposed to escort him. The bandits introduce themselves, threatening the mercenary to give them whatever he has, or face the same fate as his knight friend. Confusion and grunts follow, as the bandits are startled at the sight of the knight's body, slowly hovering over the ground with dark energy surrounding it. The corpse calls them fools, questioning their decision to attack them. The knight's eye glares at the bandits as it continues to tell them that they don't have anything to give. The bandits immediately step back at the shocking sight of the speaking corpse. Just then, a bandit leaps over at the mercenary to attack him with his blade, calling the other bandits fools. He explains that this guy is just a drunkard, and if they kill him, the revenant knight will also disappear. However, the bandit is startled and dazed when his sword breaks into two pieces upon contact with the mercenary. He questions this sight. The mercenary then speaks to the bandit, saying that once he bet against the sun on who would be the one to remove the bandit's clothes. The sun then set the clothes ablaze with flames hotter than lava, burning the bandits down to their bones. The bandit nervously steps back at the odd storytelling. The mercenary yells out that what the sun really wanted to remove was the mask of this rotten world. He wanted to burn and purify the armor of those who live in that world. The bandit wails and screams in horror as the mercenary now holds a giant fireball in his hand above his head. He yells out, calling the wicked men to burn and die, as this is the only atonement and salvation for their sins. Shocked by the sight of the burning ball of fire, the bandits scream and flee from the dangerous adversary they believe to be a demon. Amid the commotion, silence takes over as the ball of fire disappears into thin air. The mercenary lifts his hood to reveal his face, and it's our beloved hero, Firkin the Strong. The knight also sits up and stands beside our hero, asking if he was going to blow everything up just to catch one bandit. Firkin explains that the fireball may be big, but it was empty inside. Now turning attention to the knight, the arrow is pulled from his head. He lifts off the helmet, revealing himself to be the Wraith King. Firkin the Strong compliments his incredible ability to take an arrow to the head before pointing out that he's bleeding. The king explains that he has become a lich. Such injuries don't mean much to him. A short moment later, the bandit sleeps soundly on the ground, while the Wraith King has changed into his attire. He questions if he now has to walk around pretending to be a bandit. He exclaims that he is known for being the Wraith King and he has a face to keep. But this is contradicted by the strong warrior who questions if he should then spread the word of a lich being around here. He also adds that he saw a church on the way here and he wanted to find a way to kill that thing once and for all. The king, however, exclaims that he is not scared of the church, and our hero shares the same sentiment. He elaborates that it is Arthur he's concerned about, and he doesn't care if he wins or loses against the church. He then calls the king once again, reminding him that he wants him in perfect condition until their contract is fulfilled. This is where we learn of the conversation between the king and our hero after he asked him to create a new lich. He explains to the king that he is going to turn a certain someone into a lich and bring him back to life. He adds that the person will be the key to finding the holy sword, believing it to be quite simple. But the Wraith King doesn't agree. He explains that this is a different level of work than creating a revenant. He mentions that every life is cursed with oblivion when it dies in order to rest in peace. He continues and says that it's both a curse and a blessing. So, he asks the warrior if he's going to commit a taboo for his own interest and reincarnate a man who was once his best friend, just for him to live as a being cursed by the world. Our hero ponders deeply but concludes that he doesn't care about any of that. He just needs to find the holy sword. The king comments that it's quite brave of our hero, and Firkin adds that Arthur will understand that they're just playing around as close friends. He adds that he needs Arthur because he was the guardian of the holy sword. The strong warrior asks the Wraith King for help and advises that he'll let him go and never appear in front of him again. But the king questions what will happen if he refuses. The strong warrior signals a threat as he thuds down his fist to show his incredible strength, alerting the king about what will happen if he doesn't comply. And so, the king shakes hands with our hero to make a deal. Purple trails of energy flow off into the atmosphere as a dark book appears in front of the king. He addresses the strong warrior, explaining that to resurrect a lich, the body needs a lot of preparation. Upon questioning what the body needs, the king explains that they need the heart that will make up the body of the sacrifice, an eye that can find the souls, and the list goes on. But he's interrupted by the warrior who exclaims that he doesn't understand this complicated stuff. He asks the king about the places they should go, offering to guide them there. Back in the present, our hero and the Wraith King stand before a cliff, gazing into the valley before them. The king tells them they've arrived at the place Firkin wished for. They stand before a large tree glowing with energy. The king explains that this is the ancient tree forest, Elves' Garden. Our hero questions if they can get the essence of the forest in this place, and the king answers that bringing back the dead requires a sacrifice. He compares bringing back other living beings to humans. And he continues to compare as he asks our hero if the guy he wants to revive is a wizard. Our hero affirms and asks what's wrong. The king turns his attention toward a loud snarl and growl of a wild animal. A bear with scars and marks all over its body slowly walks through the forest trees. The king elaborates that this is the place where an old friend of his lives. Archers and foot soldiers hide among the forest habitat, trying their best not to make a sound. They hide behind trees and gaze upon the large bear passing by them as the leaves on the ground rustle. The soldiers hiding among the bushes point out the bear that crosses them, but they're corrected by another commandant who tells them it's not just an ordinary bear. He exclaims that it's called the guardian of the forest. He adds that the wild being is also the target of today's subjugation. Hearing this, a soldier immediately rushes forward and yells to attack the animal, but the commandant scoffs and calls him a fool. The soldier runs forward with his sword pointing at the bear as he yells to honor His Majesty, the Emperor. He strikes the sword at the bear's skin, but he's startled to see his sword break into pieces. Just as he looks up, he meets the vicious glare of the bear. He wails and screams in horror. Before the man can escape, the bear growls and screams, slashing across the man's neck. The man's head topples over to the ground, and the bear stands up and growls viciously once again, claws bared. The commandant acknowledges the danger the bear presents and immediately calls his soldiers to draw their swords. The soldier, however, yells out to point that the bear looks angry. But just then, a mysterious voice calls out, saying that such an action is unnecessary. The soldiers turn their heads at the voice of the man who makes his way through the army. He declares that there's no need for sacrifices. The man exclaims that the enemy is his to fight, and immediately the soldiers speculate if the guy is a mercenary. The commandant states that he had only heard rumors, but now he finally has the chance to witness the man's power. The man stretches and adjusts his body as the commandant speaks for the man and the power of the wizard, at all. The wild animal once again growls and hisses at the soldiers in front of him. The commandant voices the concern that the atmosphere really has changed since the mage has shown up, and the soldier beside him agrees. Wizard Adol swishes his hand, signaling the animal to come at him, and the soldiers shake up in shock as they question the mage taunting the wild animal. Following the taunting gesture, the bear rushes forward to attack the mage as the soldiers continue to gossip about how he has made the beast furious. But the mage still stands his ground as he tightens the knot on his robe that covers him. The bear grows closer and closer as it reaches out its claws to slash the man. However, in a shocking turn of events, the mage has dodged the bear's claws and has swiftly moved away to throw a liver punch at the bear while he resides below its body. The soldiers gasp in shock and amazement, witnessing this amazing battle, but they add that the bear's fur is quite thick, and such a punch is not able to take it down. The bear continues to growl at the mage as it rushes, and desperately attempts to slash at him, but the mage effortlessly dodges and counters with a kick to the face of the bear. At this point, I can't even tell if this dude is actually a mage or a martial artist. Adol proceeds to move forward and reach out his fist to punch the bear with full force as it is shaken down, but he is taken aback when the bear counters and slashes its claws at the man. He falls back and holds his ground, sustaining the heavy blow, and he tuts in frustration. The soldiers continue their gossip, pointing out that, as expected, the bear is not an easy opponent, and they question why the mage is not using his magic. Answering the soldier's question, Adol grabs hold of the staff on his back and he elaborates that standing against a bear with bare fists is not an easy feat for every human, and that, in itself, is the magic. I swear, that's the most bullshit thing I've ever heard anyone say. This shit is more bonkers than Nazim, and that dude is always in the Cloud District. Bringing us back to our hero, him and the king rally through the forest trees as Firkin warns the king that they need to be careful since they are entering the forest tenders. The king agrees to be cautious as he raises concern over the forest elves throwing arrows at them at any minute. Our hero also shares the same sentiment as he adds to the concern that the master of the forest has a bad temper, and they will be in a bad spot if they get caught by him. Lightening the tense tone of the atmosphere, the king comments on the warrior to be the worst person in the forest, who destroys everything he comes across. But just as he says this, they are both dazed at the sight of what lays before them. Firkin's eyes widen and the king adjusts his attire, and they both gaze upon the odd sight that catches their eyes. They have come across a strange scene of the trees being cut off from the bark, and the Wraith King speculates what might have caused such an incident. Firkin is concerned, knowing that the forest tenders are not capable of such a strange act. In the next instant, a staff clanks on the ground, and the group of two are alerted. The voice of horses trampling the ground approaches our hero, and the army of the Emperor appears before the strong warrior as he completes his sentence. This is the work of the humans. The strong warrior contemplates over the war waged between the forest tenders and the human army, but he wonders if the tide of the war has shifted. He questions why the human army has traveled all this way inside the forest. And he is stopped by the commandant riding the horse. He threatens to kill him if he does not put his hands up. Firkin obeys and looks over at the disguised Wraith King to ask for a cigarette, but he refuses and is offended. They are questioned by the commandant, who asks them to reveal their identity and tell how they have made their way till here. The king answers that they have walked here, but Firkin interrupts him to say that they are just passing wanderers, and he mentions that he believes this place to be the land of the forest tenders, and so he asks the commandant how the army of humans has gotten to this place. Answering the strong warrior, the commandant reveals that they have come by the order of the emperor, to push away the barbarians and reclaim their ancestral land. He also adds that this place is currently in the middle of a conquest. Arrows are pointed at our hero as they prepare to engage, but the commandant signals them to stop and warns them of what happens when they break into a military area, and so he threatens to respond with martial law if they do not leave. The Wraith King's dark energy flares up in anger as he questions the resolve of the humans, but the strong warrior asks him to hold his own. And he grabs hold of the king as he tells the commandant that they did not mean to create a fuss and will be heading on their way. But just as they are leaving, the commandant calls for them once again. He exclaims that the disguised bandit matches with a bandit that is wanted, and so he demands to inspect his appearance. The king whispers to ask if he can kill them now, but the strong warrior resists a commotion and asks him to shut up, all while he contemplates if the human king had invaded the forest tender's zone and he believes this is going to get annoying. Just then, a soldier diverts the commandant's attention as he points out at something strange, and the commandant steps back in a daze when he sets his eyes on the fallen wild beast in front of him. The human army gazes upon the group that approaches him, and from that group emerges Adol, who claps his hands to wipe off the dust while he states the mission to be complete. The commandant is amused that the mage had actually caught the monster, but the mage displays humility as he expresses that he has only done his job. Adding on to the expression of amusement, the commandant also tells that he has heard of the mage defeating an ogre with his bare hands. He exclaims that the rumors turn out to be a true story. Adol answers confidently and remarks that this is an obvious result for a mage, but he immediately turns the attention towards our hero, who is crouching down at the fallen bear to inspect it, questioning the strange man's identity. By the way, can we take a moment to think how a mage defeating a bear with just his fists is an obvious result? That shit is too wild. He remarks that thankfully the bear is alive, and he comments on Adol, saying that although the young man is strong, it is not something that can be taken down that easily. This is when two spears are shoved right in front of our hero as they stop him from inspecting any further, but he playfully says that they are going to ruin his beard. The soldiers warn and threaten him as they hold the spears against him, and the commandant exclaims that if he had walked away quietly, he could have kept his life, but now he threatens that he is going to be executed by the martial law. The man asks the warrior for his last words, and in a heroic fashion, our hero somberly observes in silence before telling everyone to dodge. Arrows fly across and cut through the air as they pierce through the commandant and his soldiers in the blink of an eye, and blood sprays all over the area as they groan in pain. The remaining soldiers yell out in a panic of an ambush. They immediately call for holding a formation, and all this is being observed by a mysterious person who's listening to the cries of the humans from above a tree branch. Finally, the elves have made their appearance as their leader calls for them to not leave a single one alive. Our strong hero and warrior, Firkin, stands calmly among the panic and chaos as the horses snicker and the soldiers rush across to find shelter from the raining arrows. That's when the leader of the elves exclaims that anyone who steps foot in their forest is to become fertilizers for the trees. Does that mean our hero will also become one such fertilizer? Or will the elves also end up submitting to his overwhelming strength? Most importantly, will we ever get to see the mage use some actual magic? Stay tuned to find out in the next episode. Until next time.